My husband wasn't even cold in the ground before his sons sat down at my kitchen table and told me I had 30 days to get out of my own house. That's where I need you to start. Not at the funeral, not at the hospital, right there, at my kitchen table in Nashville, Tennessee, the one Miles and I picked out together at an antique market on Charlotte Avenue 16 years ago. The table where we ate Sunday breakfast, where I paid his medical bills by hand, check after check, while he was dying. Dylan Bates sat at the head of it. My chair, the one I always sat in. He didn't ask. He just sat down, crossed his arms like he owned the place, because in his mind he already did, and said, "Juliana, we need to talk about the estate." Dylan was 42, Miles's oldest from his first marriage. Broad shoulders, his father's jaw, none of his father's heart. He wore a blazer to a meeting in my kitchen like he was already practicing for the day he'd walk me out the front door. Ryan was quieter, 39. He sat beside his brother with his hands folded and his eyes on the table, the way a man looks when he knows what's coming is wrong but has already decided not to say so. I'd known these two men for 18 years. I ironed Ryan's dress shirt for his first job interview. I drove Dylan to the ER at 2 in the morning when he thought he was having a heart attack and it turned out to be anxiety. I called them my boys, not Step anything, just mine. And here they were, delivering me a verdict. "The will is clear," Dylan said, sliding a folder across my kitchen table. "The house goes to Ryan and me, the property in Gatlinburg, the business accounts. Dad was very specific." I didn't touch the folder. "There's a life insurance policy," Ryan added, still not looking at me. $180,000. That's yours. It should be enough to get you started somewhere." Somewhere. I was 61 years old. I had given up a career in healthcare administration to manage Miles's life, his home, his business dinners, his doctor appointments, his final breath. And Ryan Bates, a boy I had loved, just said somewhere like I was a tenant whose lease had run out. "You have 30 days, Dylan said. He stood up, smoothed his blazer. He said fair. I remember that word specifically because it was the moment something in me went completely still. Not angry, not devastated. Still, like the moment before weather changes. They left. I heard Dylan's truck back out of the driveway that Miles had repaved just 2 summers ago. I sat alone at my kitchen table, in the wrong chair, in the wrong end of my own life, and I just breathed. Then I opened the folder. The house was valued at $620,000, the Gatlinburg cabin $480,000. Miles's landscaping business, which I had quietly co-managed for 11 years without a title or a paycheck, valued at $310,000. And my inheritance, $180,000. After I paid taxes on it, I'd have maybe $140,000 to restart a life I had spent nearly 2 decades building here. I closed the folder. I stood up. I walked to Miles's study, the small room off the hallway that still smelled like his cedar cologne and old invoices, and I sat in his chair. It was the first time I'd been in that room since he passed. On his desk, beneath a coffee mug I hadn't washed because I couldn't bring myself to, was a yellow legal pad. Miles had always kept one nearby. He was a handwritten notes man in a digital world. Half-finished to-do lists, measurements, phone numbers with no names attached. I almost didn't look at it, but something, I don't know what to call it, instinct, grief, 18 years of knowing how this man thought, made me flip to the last page he'd written on. There were 4 words in his handwriting. Call Lilly, she knows. I stared at those 4 words for a long time. Lilly Hawkins had been Miles's accountant for over a decade. She was sharp, quiet, and had always looked at Dylan and Ryan with an expression I could never quite read. I always assumed it was just professional distance. I picked up my phone. She answered on the second ring. "Juliana," she said, and her voice had something in it, relief maybe, or urgency. "How soon can you come in?" I didn't know it then, but that phone call was the first move in a game Miles had been playing for months, a game Dylan and Ryan thought they'd already won. They hadn't even seen the board yet. Lilly Hawkins worked out of a small office in Brentwood, about 20 minutes south of Nashville. Nothing fancy. A converted Victorian house on a quiet street with a hand-painted sign out front and a waiting room that smelled like coffee and old paper. The kind of place that looked like it couldn't possibly matter, and therefore did. I'd been there maybe twice in 18 years. Miles handled the finances, I handled everything else. I pulled into her lot on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after Dylan sat at my kitchen table. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch. I was wearing the same cardigan I'd worn to Miles' funeral because I kept forgetting to do laundry. I looked like a woman who was losing, because I thought I was. Lilly met me at the door herself. She was mid-50s, natural gray at her temples, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She took one look at me and said, "Come in, I made tea." We sat in her back office. She closed the door. She didn't start with small talk or condolences or any of the soft language people use when they're about to tell you something hard. She just placed a manila envelope on the desk between us and said, "Miles gave me this 14 months ago. He told me if anything happened to him, I wasn't to open it. I was to give it to you directly. Not to his sons, not to his attorney, to you." I looked at the envelope. My name was on the front, Juliana. His handwriting, the way he wrote my name, the J looping wide, the way it always had on birthday cards and grocery lists, and the note he tucked in my luggage the first time I traveled without him. My hands were shaking when I opened it. Inside were 3 things. The first was a letter, 2 pages, front and back, written in Miles' careful print. I'll tell you what it said in a moment because I need you to understand what the second item was first, because that's what broke me open before I even got to the words. It was a photograph. Miles and me. Taken maybe 4 years ago at a friend's backyard in East Nashville. We were laughing at something off camera. His arm was around my shoulder, and he was looking at me, not at the camera, at me, with an expression I had seen 10,000 times in 18 years and never once took a photograph of in my mind the way I should have. I had to put the photograph down. I couldn't look at it and read at the same time. The letter began, "Jules, if you're reading this, then Dylan and Ryan have already made their move. I'm sorry I couldn't warn you out loud. I need you to know I tried to fix this the right way first. I asked them both, separately, to do right by you. They said what I wanted to hear and then did the opposite, so I stopped asking." He'd known. While I was driving him to chemo appointments and sleeping in hospital chairs, he had known exactly what his sons were planning, and he had been quietly, methodically building something they couldn't touch. I kept reading. The third item in the envelope was a single business card. Amani Burgess, a state attorney, the Burgess Law Group, Franklin, Tennessee. Handwritten on the back in Miles' print, "She has everything. Trust her completely." I looked up at Lilly. "Did you know what was in here?" I asked. "No," she said, "but I know what I found when I started pulling Miles's financial records after his death. And Juliana," she paused, took her glasses off, set them on the desk. The kind of pause a person takes when they're deciding how directly to say something. "Dylan and Ryan have been lying to you about more than the will." She opened her own folder. She turned it to face me. I looked at the numbers. Then I looked again. The landscaping business Miles had built over 23 years, the one Dylan told me was worth $310,000, had a secondary operating account I had never seen, not because Miles hid it from me, because Dylan had removed my name from the authorized users list 11 months ago, while Miles was alive, while Miles was sick. "He forged your removal," Lilly said quietly. "I flagged it at the time, but Miles told me to leave it. He said he was handling it." He was handling it. Ryan, too. Lilly showed me transfer records, modest amounts, nothing that would trigger an audit by itself. $8,000 here, $12,000 there, moved from the business account into a private LLC registered in Ryan's name. Over 14 months, it added up to just over $190,000. They had been stealing from their dying father, not after his death, during his life, while I was making him soup and refilling his prescriptions and telling him everything was going to be okay. I sat in that chair in Lily's quiet office in Brentwood, and I did not cry. I want to tell you I did. It would be more human, maybe, but I didn't. I felt something go cold and clear in my chest, the way a window looks after rain. I picked up Amani Burgess's card. "Has she been expecting my call?" I asked. Lilly nodded. "For months." I drove to Franklin that same afternoon. Amani Burgess's office was nothing like Martin Solis's, Miles's old estate attorney, the one Dylan and Ryan had kept on retainer to push their version of the will through. Amani's office was modern, calm, and precise. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a glass desk, a woman in her early 40s who stood when I walked in and shook my hand like she'd been preparing for this meeting for a long time. "Mrs. Maynard, your husband was one of the most careful men I've ever worked with. Sit down. This is going to take a little while." She placed a document on the desk. Not the will Dylan showed me. A different will, dated 9 months ago, signed, witnessed, notarized. "This is the real one," Amani said simply. I stared at it. "Then what was the document Dylan showed me?" Amani's expression didn't change, but her voice did, just slightly, just enough. "An older version, one Miles revoked and replaced, one his sons knew had been revoked." The room was very quiet. "I knew," I said. "Yes," she said, "they knew." She let that sit for exactly the right amount of time. Then she folded her hands and looked at me directly. "Juliana, your husband left you everything, every property, every account, full control of the business. And he left Dylan and Ryan," she paused, "a letter. A letter. Not money, not property, a letter. I didn't know yet what was in it, but I was starting to understand that Miles Bates had not left this world quietly. He had left it like a man who had been paying very close attention, and Dylan and Ryan were about to find out exactly how much their father had seen. Amani slid the real will across the desk like it was just paper. It wasn't just paper. It was 18 years of Miles watching, listening, loving me, and quietly making sure that when the worst happened, and he knew it would, he'd known for months, I would not be left standing in the rubble of a life I'd built with my own hands while his sons picked through the pieces. I read it slowly. Amani didn't rush me. The house on Chickering Road, mine. The Gatlinburg cabin, mine. The landscaping business, Bates Green, which I had helped build from a 2-truck operation into a company with 14 employees and 3 municipal contracts, mine. A brokerage account I hadn't known existed with $2.3 million in it, mine. A separate savings account with $410,000, mine. And then a clause that made me stop breathing for a moment. In the event that Dylan Bates or Ryan Bates contest this will, present fraudulent documents, or make any legal claim against the estate, all charitable giving provisions revert to the Juliana Maynard Discretionary Trust, and the letter held by Amani Burgess shall be submitted to the Davidson County District Attorney's Office along with all supporting documentation. He had built a wall around me, and then he had built a wall around the wall. "The letter," I said. "The one for Dylan and Ryan. What's in it?" Amani opened her desk drawer and removed a sealed envelope. She set it between us, but didn't push it toward me. "Miles instructed me to read it to you first, so you would understand your options before we move forward." She opened it. She read quietly, professionally, but I watched her face and I saw the moment, brief, controlled, where something moved behind her eyes. Miles had written it directly to his sons. I'll give you the shape of it because some of it is still too close to read aloud even now. He told them he knew about the account transfers, all $190,000 of it. He had the records, the dates, the forged authorization form removing my name. He told Dylan he knew about the debt, $260,000 owed to 3 separate creditors, 2 of them connected to a gambling operation out of Antioch that the Metro Nashville police had been quietly investigating for 14 months. He told Ryan he knew about the clients, 6 of them, retirees mostly, people who had trusted Ryan with their savings and watched it disappear into a consulting business that existed mostly on paper. He told them he had given copies of everything to Amani Burgess with instructions to hold it unless they behaved with integrity after his death. They had not behaved with integrity. And then, at the end of the letter, and this is the part that undid me completely, Miles wrote this: "I don't hate you. I want you to know that. You are my sons, and I loved you even when you made it hard. But I loved Juliana honestly, and she deserved better than what you were planning to give her. You made your choices. Now you'll live inside them." I had to look away from Amani when she finished reading. I stared at the bookshelf across the room and I breathed through it. Cedar cologne, old invoices, 4 words on a yellow legal pad. Call Lilly. She knows. He had been sick and scared and exhausted, and he still did all of this for me. "What are my options?" I asked when I could speak again. Amani set the letter down. "Option 1, she said, you present the real will and probate. Dylan and Ryan can accept it or contest it. If they contest it, the DA's office receives everything. Given what's documented, we're looking at potential charges for wire fraud, elder financial abuse, and in Ryan's case, possibly securities fraud for the client funds. Option 2, You give them a chance to walk away quietly. They sign documents acknowledging the real will, relinquish all claims, and in exchange, you don't initiate criminal proceedings. They lose the inheritance, they keep their freedom. And option 3? She looked at me carefully. You give them exactly what they told you they were giving you. I didn't understand at first. Then I did. The properties, I said slowly, with the mortgages. Amani nodded. Miles, careful, quiet, methodical Miles, had mortgaged both the Nashville house and the Gatlinburg cabin to their maximum values over the past year. The house carried $890,000 in liens, the cabin $620,000. Together, the properties were worth approximately $1.1 million and carried $1.5 million in debt. He had told Dylan and Ryan they were inheriting assets. He had actually prepared them a $400,000 hole in the ground and wrapped it in a bow. He moved all the real money months ago, Amani said, into accounts only you can access. What's left in the estate, what Dylan and Ryan think they're getting, is the debt. I sat with that for a moment. He built the trap before they even knew there was a trap, I said. 14 months ago, Amani confirmed. Right around the time Lilly flagged the first unauthorized transfer. 14 months. He'd known for 14 months that his sons were stealing from him, and he had said nothing. He had sat at Sunday dinner and talked about the Titans and the weather and whether the hydrangeas along the back fence needed replacing, and underneath it all, he had been building this. Building me a life they couldn't reach. I thought about Dylan in my kitchen, the blazer, the folder. 30 days, Juliana, we think that's fair. I thought about Ryan not meeting my eyes. I thought about the photograph Miles had placed in that envelope, the one where he was looking at me instead of the camera. I need a few days, I told Amani. Take the time you need, she said, but I want you to know one more thing before you go. She pulled out a final document, a financial summary, single page. Between the brokerage account, the savings, the business valuation, and the insurance policies Miles held, there are 2 of them, not 1. Your total inheritance is just under $3.2 million. The number didn't feel real. It felt like something happening to someone else in a movie I was watching from across the room. Miles was wealthy? I said. It came out almost as a question. Miles was very private, Amani said. There's a difference. I drove home on I-65 in the dark. Nashville's skyline glittered in the rearview mirror, all glass and light, like it didn't know anything had happened, like the world was the same size it had been this morning. It wasn't. I pulled into the driveway on Chickering Road, my driveway, my house, my hydrangeas along the back fence, and I sat in the car for a long time. My phone had 7 text messages from Dylan, 3 from Ryan. I didn't read them. I went inside, made tea, and sat in Miles's chair in his study. I picked up the yellow legal pad, flipped past his lists and his notes and his half-finished thoughts until I reached the last page again. Call Lilly, she knows. Below that, I noticed for the first time, I had missed it before. The ink was light, like he'd almost not written it. 4 more words. You are not alone. I had $3.2 million, a real will, and evidence that could end both of my stepsons' lives as they knew them. What I didn't have yet was a plan. That changed the next morning when Sydney Austin walked into Amani's office and told me something about Dylan that even Miles hadn't known. Sydney Austin was Dylan's own attorney. Let that land. She walked into Amani's office the next morning in a gray blazer, set her bag down, and said, "I can't do this anymore. I need to tell someone what I know." She'd been hired 6 months ago to help Dylan structure the estate claim. What she didn't know when she took the case was that Dylan had lied to her about the will, about the accounts, about all of it. When she started pulling the real documents, she found the transfers, the forged authorization, the shell accounts. She looked at me across Amani's conference table and said, "He used me to help him steal from you. I'm not going to be part of that." She handed Amani a folder. Inside were text messages between Dylan and Ryan, casual, careless, the way men talk when they think no one is watching. One from Dylan sent the week Miles was in hospice. "Once it's done, we move fast. She won't know what hit her." I read it once, put it face down on the table. "Thank you," I told Sydney, and I meant it simply, without drama. She nodded and left. Amani looked at me. "Are you ready?" she asked. "Call them in," I said. Dylan and Ryan arrived at Amani's office that afternoon, thinking they were coming to watch me sign surrender papers. Dylan wore the blazer again. Ryan had his hands in his pockets. They settled into their chairs across the conference table with the relaxed posture of men who had already won. Martin Solis, their estate attorney, sat beside them with a folder of his own. Amani sat beside me. Lilly was there too, quiet in the corner with her records open on her laptop. And Camden, Amani's investigative associate, a careful man who didn't say much, sat at the end of the table with a second copy of everything. Dylan looked around the room and something shifted in his face, just slightly. "What is this?" he said. "A meeting," I said. Amani placed the real will on the table. Dylan stared at it. Ryan leaned forward. Martin Solis picked it up and read the first page, and I watched his face go the color of old paper. "This is dated," started Martin. "9 months before Miles died," said Amani. "Properly executed, witnessed, and filed. It supersedes every prior version." Dylan's jaw tightened. "Where did this come from?" "Your father," I said. "He planned ahead." Ryan looked at me for the first time, really looked at me. I think he was searching for the woman who had sat quietly at her kitchen table 3 days ago and taken everything they gave her without flinching. She wasn't there anymore. The will leaves everything to Juliana, the house, the cabin, the business, all accounts, in full. "We'll contest it," Dylan said immediately. Camden opened his folder. "You're welcome to," Amani said evenly. "But before you decide, there are a few things you should see." Camden slid the bank records across the table first. The transfers. $190,000 moved from Bates Green's operating account into Ryan's LLC over 14 months. Dates, amounts, account numbers, clean and exact. Ryan's face didn't move, but his hands, flat on the table, pressed down harder.
Then the forged authorization form, my name removed from the business account while Miles was in chemotherapy.
Then Sydney Austin's folder, Dylan's own text messages. Once it's done, we move fast. She won't know what hit her. Dylan read his own words and said nothing. Wire fraud, Amani said quietly. Elder financial abuse. In Ryan's case, we also have 6 client accounts, retirees, whose funds were moved without authorization. That's a separate matter, but it becomes relevant the moment this goes to a judge. The room was very still. Martin Solis closed his folder, set his pen down. He was done. "What do you want?" Dylan said. His voice had changed. The boardroom confidence was gone. What was underneath it was smaller. I folded my hands on the table. "I want you to sign," I said. "The documents Amani prepared. You relinquish all claims, you acknowledge the real will, and you accept your inheritance as Miles intended it." "Which is what, exactly?" Ryan asked. Amani slid the property summary across. Both of them read it. I watched the moment it registered, the mortgage figures, the lien totals, the math that didn't add up the way they'd expected. "The houses are underwater," said Ryan slowly. "By approximately $400,000 combined," Amani confirmed. "The mortgages transfer with the properties. If you accept them, you'll need to refinance within 60 days or face foreclosure proceedings." Dylan looked up. "He did this on purpose." "Yes," I said. "He knew?" Dylan stopped, started again. "He knew what we were doing?" "For 14 months, Dylan. He knew for 14 months, Dylan, and he still came to Sunday dinner. He still answered your calls. He just made sure that when it was over, I would be okay." Something moved across Dylan's face. I don't know what to call it. Not guilt exactly. Something raw. The look of a man confronting the distance between who he thought his father was and who his father had actually been watching him be. Ryan signed first. He picked up the pen without a word and signed every page Amani placed in front of him. He didn't look at me when he was done. He looked at the table. Dylan sat for another long moment. Then Dylan signed. They left without speaking. I stayed in my chair after they were gone. Lilly quietly closed her laptop. Camden gathered his folders. Amani poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of me and sat back down. We didn't say anything for a while. "It's done," she finally said. "It's done," I agreed. But it didn't feel the way I thought it would. I had expected relief or satisfaction or something sharp and clean. What I actually felt was grief. Plain, quiet grief. For the family that had never quite been, for the sons who could have chosen differently, for the man who had spent his last healthy months building walls instead of resting. I picked up my coffee. Outside Amani's window, Franklin was just going about its Tuesday. People walking dogs, a woman pushing a stroller, a man backing a truck out of a parking space too slowly. Life, ordinary and indifferent, continuing. "Miles would have hated all of this," I said. Amani smiled. "He also planned every inch of it." "That's very him," I said. Dylan and Ryan Bates left that office with 2 underwater properties, no cash, and a letter from their father they would have to live inside for the rest of their lives. I left with everything Miles had built. But the thing I carried out that I didn't walk in with, the thing I didn't expect, was the question of what I was going to do with it. That answer came from the most unexpected place, and it changed what this whole story actually meant. I sold the Chickering Roadhouse in March. Not because I had to, because I couldn't sleep in it anymore without reaching for someone who wasn't there. Every room held a version of Miles I wasn't ready to say goodbye to yet, and I realized I was keeping the house the way you keep a wound, carefully, constantly, at the cost of healing. I needed somewhere new. I found a small house in Asheville, North Carolina, Blue Ridge Mountains visible from the kitchen window, a back porch that caught the afternoon light, a garden that had been neglected for 2 seasons and needed exactly the kind of slow, patient attention I suddenly had time to give. I paid cash. I planted things. I want to tell you what happened to Dylan and Ryan because you've earned that and because it matters. Not as satisfaction exactly, but as truth. Dylan lost the Nashville house to foreclosure 8 weeks after signing. The gambling creditors came next. By summer, he was in a debt restructuring program and attending court-mandated counseling. The blazer, I assume, went to a consignment shop somewhere. Ryan's consulting clients, the 6 retirees, filed a civil complaint. He settled quietly, which meant what little he had left went to them, which was right. Last I heard, he was working a management job in Knoxville, starting over in the way people start over when they've lost the right to be careless. Bianca, Ryan's wife, who had smiled through that whole dinner like everything was fine, filed for separation in April. I didn't blame her. She had built her life on sand that wasn't even hers. I don't hate any of them. I want to be honest about that. Hate would have required me to keep carrying them, and I was done carrying things that weren't mine. Lilly called me in May. She had a client, she said, a woman in Murfreesboro, 64 years old, widowed 3 months ago. Her late husband's adult children from a previous marriage had shown up within 2 weeks of the funeral with documents she didn't understand and a 30-day timeline she didn't know she could refuse. Sound familiar? Lilly gave her my number. Her name was Mila. She called on a Thursday evening and talked for 40 minutes without stopping, the way people talk when they've been holding something alone for too long. I sat on my back porch in Asheville and listened to every word. When she finished, I said, "Don't sign anything yet. I know someone who can help." I called Amani that same night. That was how it started. Not with a plan, with a phone call, with one woman who had been through it recognizing the sound of another woman standing at the edge of the same cliff. By August, Amani and I had formally established the Miles Bates Foundation, named for the man who had made it possible, who had been paying attention even when no one knew he was watching. The foundation provided legal support and financial advocacy for surviving spouses facing estate fraud, specifically the kind that happens quietly inside families in the weeks after a funeral when grief makes people easy to manipulate. Amani ran the legal side. Lilly handled financial forensics. I did the thing I turned out to be best at. I answered the phone. Summer, a social worker Amani knew from her Franklin practice, came on to manage client intake. Camden stayed involved, doing what he did best, finding the documents people didn't know existed. In our first 6 months, we helped 11 women. 11 women who had done everything right, loved faithfully, built quietly, given generously, and been handed a folder and a countdown clock in return. I think about Miles every day. That's not grief anymore, or not only grief. It's just the shape my days have. He's in the coffee I make at 6 in the morning and the hydrangeas I planted along the back fence because I needed something familiar. He's in the careful way I read every document now before I touch a pen. He's in the foundation, in every case we take. I used to think the greatest thing Miles gave me was security, the accounts, the will, the walls he built for my future while he was running out of time to build anything at all. But that wasn't the greatest thing. The greatest thing was those 4 words on a yellow legal pad. You are not alone. He wrote them lightly, like an afterthought, like he almost didn't. But he knew there would be a night when I sat in his chair in the dark and needed someone to say it, and he wouldn't be there to say it out loud. So he wrote it down. That's who he was. That's who I'm trying to be now. If you are sitting somewhere tonight holding a document you don't understand, surrounded by people who are counting on your confusion, I need you to hear this. You have more time than they want you to think. You have more options than they've shown you. And somewhere in what your person left behind, there is something they put there for you. Look for it. Don't sign anything yet. Call somebody who will tell you the truth. This is Juliana Maynard, Nashville, Asheville, wherever I'm needed next. Miles built me a foundation. I'm just deciding what to build on top of it.